Hi, everybody. So my name is Doug DeFrank. I am here to talk to you folks today about PowerCLI and ways you can use it to manage RDMs and a couple of other things in VMware to automate just various tasks that you might have in your environment. I just recently started a tech blog about a year ago over at dougdefrank.com, and you can find me on Twitter also at dougdefrank. So for those of you who may not be familiar with PowerCLI, why would you look at using it? For me, I've noticed I've been able to save a significant amount of time, reduce mouse clicks in the GUI to get information or to try to achieve a task that I'm working on. Again, automating repetitive tasks, maintain consistency. If you do things multiple times through the GUI, chances are you may screw one or two up, or if you're like me, have that bit of self-doubt where, did I really click that thing? Let me go back and verify, and then the next thing you know, you're doing double the work. And also, again, reducing human error. And to be honest, some tasks simply just cannot be performed in the GUI. So you either come into PowerShell or even SSH into a host and do it there. So one word of warning. As always, if you're going to start with scripting, be sure to do this in production, in a non-production environment, like a test or dev. Do not do this in production. So in this instance, have you ever seen this happen before? You reboot an ESXi host and you get stuck with this message, USB arbitrator start, and it sits there for several minutes, possibly hours, just sitting there waiting to detect all of your storage. In this case, we had RDMs attached to a host, and that was super fun. It took the host, I think, 4 or 6 hours to finally reboot because of the number of RDM disks that were attached to it. That was not fun. So my thought process in all of this was, okay, I'm doing some research online in the community and other blogs, and I found 2 bits of code here that in a script that really helped me out. Okay, I want to connect to this host, and I want to do this task. Find this particular worldwide name in the environment and set perennial reservation on it so that the host ignores it and moves on and can boot faster. But I would have to go to each host and run this multiple times for each host in my cluster and for each unique ID that I had. But I had a start. It was a baseline. So I did some more research to see if I can develop this into something that can fix multiple hosts in the cluster at once. And then it started getting me thinking, well, some of the folks maybe on my team or other teams aren't that familiar with scripting. They may not know to go in there and set the cluster name, set the host name, or the vCenter that you're trying to connect to. So I started changing my mindset in the scripting to ask the user for some of these questions. While they run the script, hey, what vCenter do you want to connect to? What cluster are you looking to scan or fix? Or even a variation of that, what data center do you want to connect to look for these RDMs? So finding the RDMs and setting perennial reservations, this was kind of, as my thought process developed, I had this workflow come through where you have, again, what vCenter, what cluster are you looking for? Why don't you go ahead and scan the entire cluster for those RDM disks? If it finds RDMs, display the results. If it doesn't find any RDMs, just say, hey, no RDMs were detected, exit. But if it does, give the user the option. Do you want to export this data to CSV, yes or no? And if yes, export the results and then exit. So thinking about the workflow really helped me in terms of, okay, what do I want to achieve with this and where do I want to go with the script? And then, so now that I've found that I have RDMs in the environment, how do I fix them? So a very similar thing here with the fixing the RDMs workflow. Again, similar to before, ask the questions, what vCenter, what cluster, look for RDMs. If you find the RDMs, change the perennial reservation status to true. If there aren't any RDMs, then just exit. And again, give the user the option to export out of CSV. And so with that, that would look for RDM disks that were attached to VMs in a cluster or an environment. And then I took what I learned from that in terms of asking the user for input and asking questions when they're running the script. In one case, I know of a customer that they didn't have, was it enterprise licensing? Enterprise Plus to do distributed virtual switches. They had a bunch of standard switches still. So how can I take what I learned with my RDM script and apply that to adding port groups? You don't want to go to each host, add network 50, network 51, network, and just so on every time for each host and have it named the same way. Again, that's case sensitive. Some people may use caps, some people may not. So in thinking of that workflow here, again, I asked similar questions, the vCenter, the cluster, But then what vSwitch do you want to connect or create? And what's the name of the port group? And what VLAN ID do you want to give it? And then it goes through and it validates. Is this VLAN a valid number? If you say, I want to connect to VLAN A, well, A is not a valid VLAN number, so do some verification there to make sure it's a number between 1 and 4095, I think it was. And then so validate the VLAN, and then go ahead and create that port group on each host. And then at the very end, chances are, if you're doing this manually for a new host or a new cluster or something, you probably have more than one network you want to add. So add them. Ask the user the question again. Do you want to create another port group here? If yes, go back through and loop and just keep asking the question until they're basically said, no, I'm good. I've added all the networks that I want to add to my particular host or cluster. And then this one kind of became what I'll call like my maintenance script. Again, a recent example is we're doing a storage migration in the past where you're trying to come off an old array and bring a new array into the environment for those of us that may not be on vSAN yet. So I created this script to ask the user a multitude of questions. In this case, SSH, you want to enable SSH across all your hosts in the environment or disable SSH. And same thing with lockdown mode. If that's turned on, you know, you're not able to, SSH may be on, but you can't connect in if lockdown mode's enabled. So I created this, what I call the cluster maintenance script, if you will, that what vCenter, what cluster, what task do you want to perform? And then it asks the user a series of questions. Do you want to enable SSH? Do you want to disable lockdown mode? Do you want to disable SSH? Do you want to enable lockdown mode? When these two are like when you're done, first two are when you're starting maintenance. If the question, did they answer 5, which is exit? No. Well, if the choice is not 5, then do one of these tasks. And so it would loop through, and you could kind of leave it there in the background where you could turn on, enable SSH, again, for all the hosts in the cluster, and just leave it sit in the background. Go do your maintenance-y things, and come back to this PowerShell window and say, okay, disable SSH again and re-enable lockdown mode and be done, call it a day, and exit. So this was something I came up with, again, really quickly to just perform those tasks whenever you're trying to do some sort of cluster maintenance. In my case, I was trying to unmount RDM disks that were no longer in use, or we decommissioned a data store that, again, was no longer in use, and so I wanted to delete the data store, unmount the line so that I could say, hey, storage team, take your LUNs back, you know, unmask them from my host. So this script I found, it became very helpful for instances in that sort of thing. And here's, I mean, it's all code on a screen, and for those of you watching, it probably looks like a bunch of garbled mess. But again, this is a sample of the script that shows, you know, one of those 5 questions for the cluster maintenance script. So that's all I have for you today, and appreciate you guys watching, and thanks for coming.
I have a question.
You have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You said we can't read it here, so where should we go to get the code?
Okay, so what I've been trying to do, again, as I mentioned, I started my tech blog over at DeFrank.com, and I've been trying to get better at when I come up with a script and I show it in the blog post. I haven't quite figured out WordPress and Git integration. I know there's a way to do it, however, I think you have to have the business plan or whatever. I'm just getting started here. Anyway, I have the code on my blog, and the latest updates for that code are available on my GitHub site. And you can find the GitHub site, I believe. There's a link on my blog for that.